Hi and welcome to A Beginner's Guide to Ableton Live 9. My name is Thomas George, I'm a composer and a producer, and I've created this course to really help you get started in Ableton Live. If you're brand new to music production or digital audio workstations, or if you've used other DAWs like Cubase or Pro Tools or Logic, this course could really help you get started making music and loops in Ableton Live 9. So I've got loads of stuff to show you in this course. We're going to start off by looking at the different types of Ableton Live. Then we're going to have a look at navigating ourselves around Ableton. Then we're going to have a look at the preferences. And then we're going to start recording in audio and MIDI. Then we'll have a look at audio effects and then MIDI effects. After this, we're going to have a look at the session view and the arrangement view. I'll then show you one of the songs that I'm currently working on, and I'm going to perform it live for you. And then I'm going to show you how to record to the arrangement view. And also in the description below, I've got a coupon code for my complete Ableton Live course, which is over 8 hours long. So if you find this course useful and you want to learn even further with me, I definitely recommend checking out my complete Ableton Live course, which you can get for only $10 and full price is $195. So let's get started and I'll see you in the first lecture. Hello, before we get started and dive into Ableton Live, I'm just going to go through the Ableton Live website. So this is just ableton.com, and Ableton do have certain offers and sales now and again. And basically, if you want Ableton or if you have Ableton Live, I'm just going to tell you about the different types of Ableton Live and what kind of computer you might need. Because if you're brand new to DAWs or digital audio workstations, this might really help. And if you don't actually already have a copy of Ableton Live, you might be a bit confused about which version to get. So having a look at the Ableton site, we can actually try Ableton Live for free, which can be really useful. So this video course here, this is free. I'm putting this online for you guys. And you can get a copy of Ableton Live for free as well. Of course, it's just a demo, it's not the full version. If you do want to upgrade, I definitely recommend upgrading to Ableton Suite. But what you could do is just start off with the free version and start off with this training video. And if it's not for you, just discard it. But really, when trying Ableton, you will realize how amazing this software can really be and the great stuff you can actually do. So we can actually, if we go down to the bottom of the page, see that it is Ableton in education. So you can get some kind of educational discount if you're a student or a teacher. But let's just go up and let's click on Live. So maybe skip this and go to the next section if you already have Ableton Live. But this is just really going to tell you the different types of Ableton, because it's not just one Ableton Live, we have several different versions. So the version that I use is called Ableton Suite. And here it's currently €479. It might seem like quite a lot of money really, but the amount of stuff you can do is really, really great. We do have a lot more sounds, instruments and effects than the standard or even the intro version. So what you could do is maybe start off with the demo and build your way up. You could start off with intro, standard and suite, but some of the stuff I'm going to talk about in this course, you will need the Ableton Suite. And if you do want to upgrade to my complete Ableton Live course, which has over 100 lectures, I will be talking about Ableton Suite. We do get certain controllers as well. You'll hear this word push get thrown around quite a lot. This is basically the controller that was built by Ableton for Ableton. So let's click on Push. And this is what the Push 2 looks like. This is the latest version of the Push. And yeah, it's really fantastic for actually creating music and even performing music live. And in my complete Ableton course, I do have a whole section all on the Push 2 if you are thinking about getting a Push. There are all different controllers as well. I use one called the APC40 Mark II, which is basically a performance controller. The Push, I personally think, is better for composing and writing music, stuff like writing in drum beats on the fly like this video here. But for actual performing live, I personally prefer the APC, but they're both fantastic and you can use them together. I also use a MIDI controller called the Oxygen 25. It's basically just a small MIDI keyboard that has a few different dials and knobs. And I do use Akai LPD8, which is a little controller that has drum pads and a few knobs on as well, and you can assign these to Ableton. So basically all the knobs and dials you have on all these different controllers you can assign to basically do what you want. so we can actually custom map certain knobs and dials to our liking. So this is kind of the Ableton website. There's loads of other stuff as well. What I'd recommend is going through this website, subscribe to their newsletter just so you get the latest news and information, because you really want to just jump into this world of digital audio production and also Ableton Live and just immerse yourself with all this music production knowledge. So join the newsletter. There's loads of different Ableton Live Facebook groups as well. I'd recommend joining a few of these just so you can have a chat with other people interested in Ableton, and you can ask questions back and forth and just really make some music production friends out online, which is really useful. These Facebook groups are absolutely incredible. When I started making music, there was nothing like this at all. Now you can just meet thousands of people or chat to thousands of people, some of them even in your local area, all about music production, Ableton Live, equipment, which can be really useful. So that's just a quick overview of the Ableton Live site. Like I said, you can try Live for free if you haven't got it already, but it will be a bit limited. And if you want to upgrade to the full version, the complete version, I'd recommend getting Ableton Suite. It's not the cheapest of digital audio workstations, but in my opinion, it's really worth it. There are certain sales on now and again, and there is educational discount. But yeah, really, you want to get Ableton Suite because you can do a lot more of this. If you just want to mess around and just test the waters, really, maybe start off with intro or the live demo. But if you want to take this seriously and you want to make some great music, I'd invest in Suite. So next, we're going to actually have a look at the Ableton Live interface. Okay, before we get started, I'm going to talk about what computer should you have. I have loads of people asking me, should I have Mac? Should I have a PC? Can I have a Hackintosh, which is basically a Mac operating system on a PC? For music making, I personally really like using an Apple Mac. It's just what I've been using for a long time, and it just works for me. I like to edit videos as well, and I like to produce music on Ableton and Logic, and I just really resonate with Apple Macs. If you want to use a PC, Ableton works fine on the PC also. You don't need a Mac necessarily. If you're a computer gamer, you might want a PC, not a Mac. I wouldn't really recommend a Hackintosh because I don't think they're as reliable as a Mac or a PC. It's kind of a hybrid crossbreed. But really, Ableton can work on any of these. I would recommend trying to have a fast computer, maybe 8 gigabytes of RAM or more, just so when you're using Ableton for live performance, the last thing you want is it lagging or even crashing. So make sure you've got quite a quick computer ready, because you will be pushing your computer quite hard at certain points, especially when we look at audio effects. For Ableton, I personally use the new MacBook Pro, but that's because I run this live with Push 2, an APC controller, my Oxygen 25 and my little Akai mixer all at the same time. And I just want something really fast, because for live, the last thing I want is it to crash or to glitch. So I've just got the fastest computer I can. But if you want to use this for production, or you're going to be performing live with just one controller, you don't necessarily need quite an expensive MacBook. You can run it from a PC. A lot of people do argue and say PCs are better than Macs at certain points. And I agree, at certain things, they are better. But I personally just like a Mac, really. I thought I'd just tell you about that because I always get people asking me, Mac or PC, which one for Ableton? So really the answer is either, just make sure it's quite a fast one. Okay, now we're in Ableton Live. You might be thinking, if you're brand new to Ableton Live, what is going on here? Where's the timeline? Where's the instruments? And we have two views in Ableton. We have something called the session view, which is this view here, which is more of a vertical view. And then we have the arrangement view. So we can go over to this button here, and this will take us to the arrangement view. This is more of a horizontal view and has a timeline. If you're used to other DAWs or digital audio workstations like Pro Tools or Logic, this will look a lot more familiar than this view. You can swap between the views like I just did there by hitting the Tab key, and this will switch between the session view and the arrangement view. So looking at these buttons here, this is actually the Ableton logo. So we have the arrangement view and the session view. So the session view basically is built up by a load of different clips, and we have these little boxes and all these dials here. So these dials are basically where your audio or MIDI information comes from. You'll notice that it says LPD8, which is a small little controller I've got here. If I plug in this APC controller, you'll see that the APC controller has just appeared here. This small box is for the APC controller. It basically allows you to map the clips on Ableton to the buttons on the APC. So I'm just going to turn this off for now and carry on talking about the Ableton interface. So we have the MIDI in. So this is where we want the MIDI information to come from. So if I want to play on, say, this LPD, I'll have to select this. And then when I hit this LPD, the MIDI information will come out of here. Let's turn monitor to off. And when I press it, as you can see here, there is data coming through. At the moment, though, there's no instrument assigned to this, so we can't actually hear anything apart from maybe the sound of me pressing the buttons. So what we can do, I'll just start off really quick. Let's just dive in. Let's go to Instruments and drag on this called Analog. And now when I hit a pad, it will play a note. So what we need for the MIDI information is we actually need the instrument. So we have the MIDI information, and that goes into here. So we can see these dots, which are MIDI information. And then this goes into an instrument, and this converts it to audio. And this here is audio. And what comes out is audio. Then this goes to our track here. So for the audio, though, this is for either audio clips, so drum loops, drum samples, that kind of thing, or even a microphone. So let's go on here, audio from, and I've got something called an audio interface, which basically allows me to plug in audio, so stuff like a guitar or a microphone, into Ableton. The one I'm using now is the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. And so I can actually record in the audio of this microphone into Ableton. So what I need to do is go down to this button here, and this will arm the track. And now when I talk, we can see this grey bar here. The reason it's grey is because the monitor is off. If I turn monitor on, it will come through here, and we can actually record it in. And you'll notice that these squares have turned to circles. This basically allows us to record in audio. So this is really the record button. So this is really the record button for Ableton Live. This is how we can record in audio. Let's turn monitor off. And then when we press this, it will play back what I just said. So this is really the record button for Ableton Live. This is how we can record in audio. So this is really the record button. And you'll notice that it actually loops round and round. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on, but this is just a really simple overview of how we can actually just get started in Ableton. It's a similar kind of thing for the MIDI also. So if we select this track here, and we can arm the track by hitting this red button. So whichever track has the red button selected will arm the track. And then for MIDI, let's turn monitor on, because we really want to hear what we're playing. And then all we have to do is hit this circle. And then this is going to record in whatever we play on this pad. And to play back, we have to make sure we turn the monitor off, and it will play back what we just played in. So that's just a really quick overview of how to record MIDI and audio in Ableton. Because I know when I get started on a new piece of software, I just want to know, how do I actually do what I want to do? In Ableton, it does really revolve around recording in parts in the session view. The session view is a super key, important part of Ableton Live. Obviously, there's a lot more stuff involved, like performing or remixing or mashing up. But to get started, recording in session view is a really crucial part. Okay, now let's have a look at some of the stuff around here. We've got sounds, which is all different sounds. If we press some of these, it will play certain sounds. If you can't hear these sounds, make sure this headphone button here is switched on so we can actually hear what we're doing. Then we have stuff like drums, instruments, audio effects, MIDI instruments, Max for Live, plugins, clips, samples. We go into this stuff in more detail and a lot more detail in my complete course for Ableton Live, where I have over 100 different lectures. But for now, this is just an overview. So the audio effects, this is stuff like delay or compression or reverb that we can actually put on after the instrument. So after we've got a clip, we can put on certain effects. And the MIDI effects is to put on before the MIDI information, so we can transform the MIDI information. So this is stuff like an arpeggiator, chords, transposition, pitch. Max for Live, we're not going to talk about in this short video course. This is basically where we can build our own sounds and effects. It's quite complex. And in my complete course, I do have a section about getting started with Max for Live. But if you're new to Ableton Live, I would not think about this right now. It is quite an advanced thing. Plugins, this is where we can add our own plugins. So if you have any third-party plugins, stuff like Massive or Silent, that kind of thing, you can find them here. And then we have clips. We have to double click to actually add them. And then we have samples. You might not have as many clips or samples as I do, but if we go back to the Ableton website, you can either upgrade to Ableton Suite, or you can find different packs and samples and actually drag them in there. There's loads of sample packs you can actually buy, stuff like Vengeance. I know deadmau5 has got a great sample pack as well. But the ones in Ableton are fantastic to start with. Maybe think about different packs and samples later on. Here I've got a load of different sample packs. Some ones that I've actually made myself, like Awoken Giant. This is a song that I wrote, and I basically got all the stems or all the parts from the track, and I just dragged them in here, and I actually plan to go through and chop these up and make my own samples out of this. So stuff like a Moog sound that I used, and a cello. So you can go through and make your own samples. So certain sounds that I've used from one of my own tracks that I wish to use in a live performance, I'm going to add in some cellos and oboes and some Moog sounds triggered from my APC controller. Okay, going down here we have something called an info view. This can be really useful, and we can turn it on or off with this arrow here. I'd recommend leaving info view on if you're new to Ableton Live. So if we go over to, say, the play button here, it will say on the info view, play button, click to start playback. If we go over to, say, this here, it will say metronome. It basically just tells us what things mean and gives us a quick summary of what it actually does, which can be really useful. Okay, going over, we see A reverb and B delay. This is something called send returns. So this is where we can send our tracks to these tracks here, and these tracks have effects on. So this A obviously has reverb and B has delay. So say this track here, track 4, we can move these dials and this will send this track into the first one, A reverb. So we can basically send it over here and this will add reverb, and then we can control the reverb. The reason we might want to do this is for two reasons. One is we can send more than one track to the same effect, so we get the same effect on all these different tracks. And the other reason is if we have a reverb plugin on here, it's just one reverb plugin. If we have, say, 4 reverb plugins in each one of these tracks, it will use up a lot more CPU power. If we go over to here, you'll see the CPU load meter. I never really want this to go past about 25% personally, because when it gets to about 30%, it really starts lagging. So you want to keep this as low as possible because your computer will perform a lot better. Okay, and going down here, we have master. So this is the master track. Then we have all these little buttons here. So these are to do with playing clips. We go into this a bit later on, but basically, if we have these clips here, we can play them all individually, or we can trigger the horizontal row of clips by hitting these play buttons here. Then going down, we have the pan, so left or right speakers, and then the volume meters for each of the tracks and for the master track. This big empty box here is for dragging effects or audio effects, so stuff like reverb, delay, compression. and we can add these to the individual tracks. Okay, next we're going to have a look at the preferences. Okay, let's have a look at the preferences for Ableton Live 9. So we need to go on this Live up here on the top left, and then go down to Preferences, or we can use the key command Command Comma, and this will open up our preferences. The key commands are slightly different for PC rather than Mac, so I would recommend going through and just having a look at the different key commands if you're using a PC, because some of the ones I'm using do revolve around the command button, which obviously is different for PC than for Mac. So looking at the preferences, we have a load of different things here. We have look, feel, so we have English, Dutch, Spanish, French, Italian, Japanese. So obviously choose the language that you're most familiar with. And then we have a few other things here. Then we have the skin, we have the default 8. I know a lot of people use this kind of black and white one, which does look quite cool, but I personally just this one here. This one does look pretty interesting. It does look quite modern and slick, but I personally just like the default one. It's just what everyone uses really, but this one can look cool. But yeah, use what you're comfortable with, use whatever you want. You can change them up, move them around just if you get bored now and again. We have the brightness, obviously, if you want to make it brighter or not. The color. Let's have a look at the audio. So we have the driver type. Leave this on core audio, I would. Then we have audio input device. I'm using an audio interface, but if you're not using an audio interface, just select built-in microphone and built-in output. Then we have the sample rate, the buffer size. I've got this buffer size quite high because on my live performances, I don't really want it to struggle. So a higher buffer size can create more latency. So if you don't want any latency, which is basically like a delay from your microphone, maybe choose a lower buffer size. But if your computer is starting to struggle, pump up the buffer size, I would say. So make sure it's over 512. I have it really high at the moment because my live performance that I'm currently working on, it's got tons of different instruments. I'm using loads of different modules, loads of different MIDI controllers. So I need to make sure it doesn't crash really, because that'd be pretty bad. And then we have the test tone. This can be really annoying. So just hit this just to see if it works. We can change the tone volume, the tone frequency, that kind of thing. Then we have link MIDI. So this is for the MIDI controllers that you have plugged in. At the moment, I've only got this LPD8, which is a small Akai pad. I've only got this plugged in, but I do use APC and the Push 2 as well. So your MIDI controllers will turn up here as well. It's a bit more information here. But make sure it's selected in this list here. So just go through and find whichever one it is. This has the list of all the most common ones. For a MIDI controller, I would recommend having some kind of keyboard device for writing music. I like the Oxygen, which is by M Audio. They have all different sizes. So if you have a lot of desk space, maybe look into having a 49 key or even more. If you have quite a limited desk space, or you want to use your MIDI controller for live performances, maybe think about getting a smaller, lightweight one. I use the 25 key one personally. I think that works great for me and my live shows, and it's got all I need on it really. And I can put in some chords really quickly. I've got some knobs that I can assign to filters and effects, and yeah, it just works for what I want really. But I've gone through loads of different MIDI controllers. At one point I had a weighted 88 key, which was a beast really. It was just way too big and way too bulky. And I actually swapped it with a friend for this 25 key version. So I personally prefer the smaller MIDI controllers. I've used them all. I used to have an electric keyboard, and I went from the MIDI out of the big electric 88 key weighted keyboard into my computer. I've had little micro MIDI controllers, 49 key ones, and even bigger ones than that. So this is what I like. Maybe go in a music shop, test a few out, see what you like, and then get one that you like personally. And also depends on if you want to perform live or if you just want to leave this at home. Okay, then we have file folder. This is basically where we keep our files and folders. A lot of this isn't that relevant for now. What I normally do is I just open up, start going, make music, and when I find a problem or I need to change something, I'll go back to the preferences and then work out what I need to change. Then we have the library, the record, warp, CPU, license, and maintenance. So the basics of this preferences is really the audio. So select your audio interface. Make sure the buffer size isn't too low if your computer isn't the fastest in the world. Even with my computer, this is a really fast computer, or really fast laptop actually, and it still can struggle just because I do push it to the limit. I do have loads of different instruments and loads of different synths running at the same time. So which is why my sample rate is really high. And then of course we have the link MIDI to select our MIDI controllers. Okay, next we're going to have a look at a bit more detail at recording audio and recording MIDI. Okay, now we're going to have a look at actually recording. So I went into this briefly before, but one thing I didn't mention was the metronome. So really, if you're recording without a beat in the background, you do want the metronome on. And if we hit this button here, this will turn the metronome on or off. Obviously, if it's a glowing yellow, it means it's on. And if it's not a glowing yellow, it's off. We have this small arrow button here. If we hit this, we also have the counting. This will just give us a feel for the beats per minute, just so we can have a counting. So I like to have 2 bars, which is 8 clicks. And then all we have to do is click on the instrument we want to record. And then go down and hit this button here, and this will arm our track. At the moment, there's no audio coming out of this. This is because the interface I'm using has 2 inputs, and the microphone that I'm speaking in is plugged into input 1. So we could have this one here, which is 1/2, or we could have this one, which is 1, which is the microphone now, and we can see the monitor coming in here. If I turn on monitor, and then you can hear me speak, there's a slight bit of delay, which sounds a bit strange, and also there's reverb. If I turn this down, the reverb will go off. But I'm going to turn off monitor for now because it does sound a bit strange. And then all we have to do is hit record, and this will record in my voice. We can record other instruments too, like a bass guitar, or we can point the microphone at, say, a saxophone. But for now, I'm just going to record in the sound of my clap. So this is the click, and it's recording now. And to stop recording, all I did is hit the space bar. Now, if we hit the play button, we can hear the clap sound, and we can turn off. We can hear a small amount of the metronome from my headphones, but if we double click on this, we can actually see the audio waves. You'll notice we have these small little arrows here. These are actually the waves, and one of the fantastic things about Ableton is we can actually drag around these waves, which makes it really incredible in my opinion. So say I didn't quite get this in time, I can just go through, neaten it up, move stuff around, which is so useful. So we can just go through, move these around, and now this will be in time. We just have to double click and it will turn these yellow, and when this yellow appears, we can go through and move them independently. And we can double click to get rid of them. And if we go up here, we can see this little magnifying glass, and this allows us to zoom. So you'll see there that the start of the wave wasn't there, it was actually there. So we can just double click, make our own, and zoom out with this magnifying glass. You'll have a look here, it switches from this speaker sign, which will play the track, up to this magnifying glass, which allows us to zoom in. So let's go along to here, zoom in. That wasn't quite right either. I'd say really it's about here. Zoom out again. Imagine it's there. I didn't play really the simplest rhythm in the world, so this might not be completely right. So this is really just a quick crash course to get you in the right direction. If you want a more detailed explanation of what I'm doing right now, I do suggest having a look at my complete course, which is over 100 lectures long. This is really just to get you in the right direction to start making music. And then we have these arrows here. So this is actually the length of our loop, and we can turn the loop on or off with this button here. So let's just hear this. I'm going to put the metronome back on, and let's just hear what I warp this to. So moving this is called warping, and we can turn warping on or off with this button here. And then we just hit play button here, and this will play. We can hear that this was incorrect. And if you do get it wrong, you can always just go in and change it again. So it was really just that copied. That up to here going round and round and round. So what I can do is I can just go in and just loop this first section if I wanted to. I don't need to correct it all. I can just go around to here and then it looped. Let's hear this. Actually finished there. Okay, so this will create the loop that I just made, and now it's perfectly in time. And also, you need to make sure loop is selected. If loop isn't selected, it's not going to loop. So make sure loop's selected. Then we have loads of stuff here. So we have the position, so we can change the position of the loop. Let's just put this back on where it was. And that's basically how we can create an audio loop. We do have something called transposition as well. This basically will make it higher or lower sounding. Okay, I just put it a bit lower to make my hands sound a bit more manly, I guess, a bit lower. Okay, and now we're going to record in some MIDI. So I've got this MIDI track selected. Let's deselect this audio track. And then we actually need to have a MIDI instrument. So we need to go over to instruments here. And here we've got a load of different instruments, but for now, just going to use this one called analog. Then all we have to do is drag it into our MIDI track. And now if I hit this pad, this is my MIDI pad. Then let's just record this in. The red button is selected here. Then all we have to do is hit this small circle, and this will allow us to record. Okay, and then similar thing to before, we just double click on this, and this will actually show us the MIDI data. If we go down here, we'll notice two views, one that says analog and one that has these kind of lines on. The ones with the lines is our MIDI information here. So each block is basically a note and it links up to this keyboard here. It's quite hard to see. We can make it bigger by dragging up like this. So we can see here that this, we can move it to different notes if we want. And then what we can do is we can put this in time also. We can even go through, select, delete, move stuff around really, really quick. It's so easy on Ableton. So the two ways we can put stuff in time is one, drag it in time like so, or two, we can do something called quantizing, which is where we can select all of these clips by dragging over and selecting, or hitting the key command, Command A, and then we can quantize. So let's hit Control and click, then we can go to quantize. There are different quantize settings. Quantize basically means we move it to one of these lines here. Each one of these lines here is a 16th note. So let's just keep it on 16th. You'll notice some of these moved in time. If I'm going a bit too quick for you, remember you can always pause this, slow down, or if you do want a more detailed description of what's going on here, remember to have a look at my complete course because I go into a lot more detail than this. But now if we hit play, then we have to make sure loop is selected, and then we can go through and change the notes as well. So it's really easy just to make our own beats and rhythms, and it's so simple to record in these loops into Ableton. So we can just go through, drag these around. We could just drag this down and resize this really easily. Okay, next we're going to have a look at audio effects. Okay, I hope you're keeping up. Remember, you can always pause this video, rewind, go back and rewatch the sections. So what we've done so far is basically gone through this, and I've showed you how to record in your own audio, how to record in your own MIDI, the basics of the preferences, and what the stuff really does in a quick overview. Next, we're going to have a look at adding our own audio effects. For audio effects, we can add this to audio tracks or MIDI tracks. For MIDI effects, we can only add this to MIDI tracks. But first of all, let's have a look at audio effects. It's really simple. All we have to do is click on audio effects here. And if you don't have Ableton Suite, you might not have as many effects as this. If you're using Ableton Intro or a demo version, or a version that's not as advanced as Ableton Suite, you might not have as many effects. So let's put on a delay. A delay is really easy to hear. Let's start off with a simple delay. It's called a simple delay because it's a delay and it's simple. So all we have to do is drag this over to our audio track. And this little box here is our simple delay. So this here is the delay time, and this is the feedback, and this is the dry and wet. So wet means it's all the delay, dry means there's none of the delay. So let's just put it about here. Let's choose a 4, and we can have independent left speaker and right speaker. So let's choose 4 and 6. And let's hear what this sounds like. We've got kind of a funky thing going on now, which is quite cool. Let's add a simple delay to this analog instrument as well. Let's choose a 4 and a 6 as well. So we've got a completely different feel to this beat as well, which is quite cool. Let's add on an overdrive. Let's just bang this onto this synthesizer. This little picture here is actually a filter. So what this does, it stops certain frequencies coming through to our sound. So if we have it like this, this will stop the lower sounds and will allow the higher sounds. So let's just hear this. You'll notice that some of the lower sounds are cut out and we can hear the higher sounds. And if we move it over, this will cut out some of the higher sounds and will allow the lower sounds. So when we use this kind of filter where we allow the low sounds and cut out the high sounds, it's called a low pass filter. And when we have it like this, where we allow the high sounds and we cut out the low sounds, it's actually called a high pass filter. So this is just a quick overview of some of the audio effects we can use in Ableton Live. Next, we're going to have a look quickly at the MIDI effects. Okay, you'll notice that the audio effects actually goes after the instrument. So this here analog is the instrument, so we need to put the MIDI information or play the MIDI notes, so play our MIDI keyboard, then it puts these notes in here. You see these small yellow blobs, and this goes into the instrument, and this turns this into audio. So you'll see these green lines here, this is audio, and then we put the effects on. Let's just turn off these effects for now by hitting this button here and here. But for MIDI effects, we actually have to put this before it goes to the instrument, so before it gets turned into audio. We can only use MIDI effects on MIDI instruments, not for audio. And let's use something called an arpeggiator. You'll notice this sound as soon as I put it on. It's used in loads of different dance music. It mainly works when we have held MIDI notes. So if we double click on analog, we can actually select all of these notes with Command and A and just drag it out like so, all the way to here. And now if I play this, you'll hear the arpeggiated notes. It sounds really fast and strange like that because I set the rate to 1/48. Let's change this to 16th notes. It gives a repeating note. And if we actually add more than one note at the same time, it will actually go between the two notes. We can draw in more notes by hitting this pencil tool here, and then we can just draw stuff in like so. For now, I'm putting this in quite randomly, just for an example, but let's hear this back. We can turn off the pencil tool by hitting the pencil button again. Then we can go in and drag stuff around. And then we can zoom in and move stuff around. So this might sound a little atonal. It might not really be in a sort of traditional key. But for this example, let's just hear what this sounds like. So let's go back to the effects. So we have to hit this button here, and this goes to the effects window. And now we can see the arpeggiator here. We have all different stuff here. Like here, style up, so we can make it go down, or up and down, and groove. So you can really just go through and experiment. It isn't really the nicest sounding arpeggiator in the world, but let's just delete some of this, because I do think I've got too much going on there. Let's just keep this really simple. We've just got an octave, so we've got C going to. Let's change this to a. Let's change this to a C. It's quite hard to see when it's this small, so we can always drag and make it bigger, like so. So I'm just going to drag this to the C, which is one octave above. And then we can always resize the loops with this button here. This will just loop between these. We can go back to the arpeggiator by hitting this button here and change the rate. And that's just a really, really quick, brief overview of the arpeggiator. There's more MIDI effects as well, like this one here called chord. You can just drag this in, and this will basically just add on more notes so we can create chords. So minus 12 is one octave lower, and plus 12 is one octave higher. But yeah, that isn't the nicest sounding MIDI effect in the whole world. So we can always delete this stuff and record it back in again. So that's basically how we can add MIDI effects, record in MIDI, and add audio effects as we talked about previously. So this is really just a quick, brief overview about Ableton Live. There's so much stuff we can actually do. This is really just to get you up and running and starting to make your own music and starting to create your own loops. Next, we're going to have a look at actually recording into the arrangement view. Okay, we've covered so much stuff just in the past few minutes, really. This is really just a quick crash course just to put you in the right direction if you're new to Ableton Live and you open it up and you don't really know what the stuff does. So we've really just gone through and I've showed you how to set up Ableton, the different things that you do, like the different buttons, how to record, and the kind of interface and some of the audio effects and MIDI effects. But we haven't actually looked really at the arrangement view. We can go over to this by hitting Tab or by hitting this button here. So we have the session view. This is normally where people write the music. You can write it all in the arrangement view. I like to personally write it in the session view. And the session view is also really important for live performance. So we can actually record all the stuff we perform in live into the session view. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to load up a project that I'm currently working on. This is part of my live performance, and then I'm going to record it into the arrangement view. So just bear with me and I'm going to open up my latest project. Okay, so here is the latest project that I'm currently working on. This might look really crazy to you, but it's basically each one of these little blocks is a clip or a loop. And then I'm going to trigger each one of these individually or together. And then I'm going to add effects and mix them into one live performance. I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration now, just so you can see on screen how you can actually perform. And one thing I'm going to do is hit this record button, and this will actually record into the arrangement view. So I've got some stuff set up here. If I hit this button, and I just hit all this and delete it, I'm going to add in something new just for you. And you can kind of see the live performance element that you really get with Ableton Live. Like I said, I will go through this in a lot more detail in my complete Ableton Live course. But for now, this is just a quick overview just to get you in the right direction to starting to making your own music. So I'm just going to play this in really quickly and I'm going to record this into the arrangement view. I hope you like this little performance. Okay, so that was just a little performance really of me recording into the arrangement view. Just going to fade this down with the master volume. Then all we have to do is hit the stop button here. And then if we go into the arrangement view, this actually recorded all of this in, which is really, really crazy. And you'll see all these wiggles here. This is basically me moving the dial on my different controllers. There's even the drum group here. This is where I group the drums together. There's quite a lot of complicated stuff going on here. But like I said, I'll explain a lot more about live performance in Ableton Live in my complete course. But this is just really a quick overview. So we can just hit the record button there. But I just wanted to show you really just a bit of my performance. This performance is around about 40 minutes long. I just gave you a quick sample. But it's really semi-improvised at the moment as well. I don't really have a structure. I just kind of do it by feel, whatever mood I'm in really. Just to make it a bit more fun. I do believe if your songs and your structure is completely rigid for live performance, it can get a bit boring and predictable. But if you mix it up and change it around every time, it does make it a lot more fun as a performer. So if I play this back, you'll be able to hear, this actually recorded in. And now we can actually go through and edit some of this stuff, which is really fantastic. You can see the automations moving. So this is the filter moving here. We can zoom in and have a look at all the different sections, which is, I personally think, is really cool. Obviously, I didn't use all of these instruments at the same time, but we could go through, for example, this here. We can go through and edit this, and we can really customize it. I remember when I first started recording music, you'd have to hire a recording studio. It cost you loads of money. You'd have to get a band together to play all the parts, and now you can basically just do it all in Ableton by yourself. You just need the software and maybe one controller and one MIDI keyboard. And there you go. It's all recorded in perfectly. I think it sounds great, and it's all just done in this one piece of software. So this is really just a quick introduction into Ableton Live. I just want to show you how to get up and running, get in the right direction, start recording, the real basics, a quick overview of Ableton Live. Because, the hardest part of Ableton, in my opinion, is just getting started. It can look quite complicated and quite scary. Obviously, of all these clips and all these boxes and stuff and all these instruments and groups, it is a bit scary. But maybe just start off building up a small beat, a small loop, and then step by step, keep on learning, keep on pushing yourself, keep on making new loops, new ideas, try and be creative. And then you'll get to a point where this won't look intimidating at all. One thing I like to do as well is all these loops are actually mine. I've created them all myself. Like all these parts I've recorded myself personally. This choir section I recorded one guy singing in different harmonies and mixed it into my own choir parts. These cello parts and oboe parts I recorded myself. That's one thing I like to do. I don't like to take other people's loops. I like to actually make my own, just for my own personal satisfaction really. But this is just a really quick overview about getting started in Ableton Live. So I hope you found this useful. So I hope you found this introduction course useful. It's really just to get you in the right direction to start making music in Ableton Live, because Ableton can look quite daunting and scary at first. And I just wanted to make this quick course so you know kind of what the stuff does. If you do want to take your knowledge to the next level, you do want to continue learning with me, I have got a course called the Complete Ableton Live course. So this is actually over 8 hours long. I have over 100 lectures. And to thank you for sticking with me and watching this introduction course, you can get this course for only £10 or $10 depending on what country you're in. All you have to do is just follow the links below this video. You just have to confirm that you're not a robot, and then I'll send you over the coupons so you can get this exact course for only £10 or $10. So it's got tons and tons of different lectures, loads of different stuff going on, and it can really help you just improve at Ableton. You also get lifetime access to this course, and there's tons of support throughout as well.